Hey, what's up, everybody? I want to welcome you to another episode of the Dreamerspro Daily Recap, where we give you a recap of all of the hot topics that we covered that day. You can catch them in their long format and also catch it fully streaming for free on Apple Podcasts. So yesterday, of course, was game one of the NBA Finals, and I actually watched the game on NBA.com. Right, so usually what happens is during commercials, you just keep the game in the arena. And during the halftime show, they don't show it, obviously, because you're not watching it on a particular network. You're watching it at NBA.com. But yesterday's game, I believe, was being carried by ESPN. And ESPN was in charge of the halftime show. I think Josh Hart was there. Stephen A. Smith was there. A few other voices. I think Mike Wilbon might have been there, and Kendrick Perkins might have been there. I may be wrong. But we produced an earlier show today that was centered on the news that TNT, Warner Brothers, could still be in the running to get, to be a part of the new NBA deal that it has renegotiated with the major networks. And then I read a comment from someone under that show, and he or she said, well, please, we need TNT's halftime show because ESPN just had an absolutely horrendous halftime show. And I'm like, what is he referring to? So I go on the internet and I start looking at other news sources and I see them talking about it. So I had to hunt down this information to see exactly what they were referring to. And I came across an article from awfulannouncing.com that was essentially explaining what it took place. And essentially what happened was ESPN's entire halftime show consisted of four segments, right? That lasted no longer than about a minute or so. And what would happen is they would play a segment, and then right after that segment, like a 30-second spot, they'll run a bunch of ads. Then they'll come back and they'll run a 22-second spot. Like Josh Hart gave an analysis. It only lasted 22 seconds. And then he comes back and they do another commercial. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, there was basically zero analysis or breakdown of the game. So then I came across an interview from Charles Barkley on Outkick, Outkick.com, their YouTube channel, where they were talking to him about a range of things. We're going to get into some of the other things that he discussed on that platform. But then they asked him about, the NBA's coverage, ESPN's coverage of the NBA Finals. And when it came time for Charles Barkley to speak, he absolutely went off on the horrible coverage that ESPN has been doing in terms of covering the NBA Finals. So what we want to do now is want to play exactly what Charles Barkley had to say on Outkick, and then want to come back and react to his comments. Take a listen to what Charles Barkley had to say here.
Danny Hurley. If you were going to advise Danny Hurley, I got two questions for you. What would you tell him? And the second thing is, Tom Izzo told me when he was looking at the Cavs job, way back, that he couldn't get a conversation with LeBron. And if he's like, look, if I can't talk to LeBron, I'm not going to the Cavs. How important would LeBron's approval be in this at this point in his career for Danny Hurley?
Well, I think it would be really important. Okay, but Dan, let me tell you something. Number one, I love Danny Hurley. I love what he's doing at UConn. But I was so mad at ESPN yesterday. I'm not going to lie. I love Danny Hurley. This has nothing to do with Danny Hurley. And good luck with him if he goes to the Lakers. But I was so pissed with game one of the finals and game one of the Stanley Cup finals coming on. For them to spend the first hour talking about what if Danny Hurley goes to the Lakers, I was so pissed yesterday. I had to turn my TV off. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, this is how stupid they are. I'm like, what? Y'all got the Stanley Cup finals and the NBA finals. And y'all talk about a team that's irrelevant. And I'm like, that whoever's doing that programming got to be the stupidest, most bonehead people in the world. I'm like, if he goes, we'll talk about it. But to just go on there and blow air for an hour and then say, Oh, by the way, we got game 1 of the finals coming up tonight. I was like, who in the hell is running their programming over there? I was like, if okay, there's nothing but speculation. Okay, but you got game 1 of the finals and you got game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, which I'm really pumped about because, man, you got Florida who lost in the finals last year, and you got a whole country of people, and you got those games as a network. And you spent the whole time talking about what if Danny Hurley goes to the Lakers? I'm like, what kind of idiots are running this network? I said, that was crazy. Like I say, I love Danny Hurley. I love his family. I love his story. I love him because he's a basketball purist. But I just thought it was so stupid of ESPN yesterday. It's like, wait a minute, y'all got the biggest game of the NBA season coming on tonight, and y'all spent the first hour talking about if Danny Hurley goes to the Lakers. I was like, come on, man. So to answer your question, man, I love Danny Hurley. He gonna have to have LeBron's approval. I understand why we just lost the greatest college football coach ever in Nick Saban. I know Jay Wright was kind of feeling that type of way. These NCAA idiots and fools, well, I should just call them jackasses like they are. I'm trying to figure out how we have screwed up college sports. Like, I said one day, I would call it the Wild Wild West, but that would be disrespectful to the Wild Wild West. Like, I have no idea, how did we ruin college sports?
So you heard what Charles Barkley had to say. What are my thoughts on this? I don't think this is anything new if we're talking about him discussing why ESPN spends so much time covering the Lakers. He called them irrelevant. That's not a surprise. The reason it's not a surprise because this same thing happened just last year. Just last year, they were talking about the Lakers, right? And it was one of the reasons why Denver Nuggets head coach Mike Malone was poking fun at the Los Angeles Lakers. Charles Barkley was complaining about it. At various points throughout the NBA season, I've heard people like Perkins, I think Mike Wilbon himself has complained bitterly about why ESPN spends so much time talking about the Lakers. So that's not the first time I've heard something like that. But in terms of ESPN's coverage, in terms of their halftime show of the NBA Finals, I think what happened was, you know those YouTube channels that have like these long shows and they put 3,000 ads? That's essentially what ESPN did. ESPN tried to pack in as many ads as they could get into that halftime show in order to make the most amount of money they possibly could. And that is essentially what happened. They saw that as an opportunity to make a whole bunch of money, and they used that halftime show to do that. Now, in terms of those 4 segments, that is quite frankly a joke. They didn't even spend 5 minutes talking about the game. It was just a bunch of nonsense. Essentially a bunch of nonsense. And for them to be called out by people, it shows you that, ESPN just paid over $2 billion again, or for I think $2.8 billion for the rights for the NBA. So if you were unhappy with the coverage that you just saw in the NBA Finals, expect to see some more of that in the future. Because that is exactly what's going to happen. ESPN is going to continue to do this, right? They paid for it. They paid for the rights, and that's exactly what's going to happen. So was it shameful? Absolutely. Absolutely. But they saw it as an opportunity to make a lot of money. And a recent report just came out that we're going to get to a little bit later today, which talks about some ratings. I think that's going to basically explain probably why they were so aggressive with basically spamming ads during the halftime show. We got some drama. This is some Brandy the Boy's Mind type of stuff. What am I talking about? As you guys know, Kendrick Perkins, we produced a show about this yesterday. went on ESPN and essentially said that LeBron James is always trying to steal the spotlight, weasel his way in and steal the spotlight from other players when the attention is on them. By that, he was referring to the comments that he made, that LeBron James made on his podcast with JJ Redick, talking about he misses Kyrie and Kyrie is the most talented, he's a magician, and blah, 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 blah. Kendrick Perkins heard that and was like, nah, stop it, right? So today on ESPN First Take, what happened? Stephen A. Smith and them are talking about this, and they play Kendrick Perkins' comments, and Udonis Haslem was there as well. And what is it? Then they asked Stephen A. Smith to weigh in on whether or not he agrees with that. And Stephen A. Smith said, absolutely. Like LeBron stay trying to ride somebody's wave, right? So they said that. So what happened? I'm going through the internet here, and I come across a clip that is recommended to me on my homepage from Nightcap. And I watch some of their shows. I believe I'm subscribed to their channel. If you're not, you should go subscribe. And in the picture, you have Shannon Sharp, you have Kendrick Perkins, you have Chad Johnson, and you have Gilbert Arenas. And all of these guys are reacting to the comments that Kendrick Perkins had to say. And we want to play what they said, and I want you guys to especially listen to the end where Gilbert Arenas comes in and what he says, because I'm like, what? So what we want to do now is want to play what these gentlemen had to say. I want you guys to listen to Shannon Sharp, listen to Chad Johnson, and listen to Gilbert Arenas at the end. And then we're going to come back and react to the comments. Take a listen to these gentlemen here.
I wish he was my running mate. Why? Because he's one of the most skillful basketball players of all goddamn time that I used to play with. How's that making it about you?
I can't say he's one of the LeBron also said he's one of the most, if not the most skilled player in NBA history. And I'm extremely happy for him, considering some of the things that he went through. Kyrie has matured. Right. Kyrie has grown. We don't need to rehash everything that he's done, but he has grown. Okay. I am so proud of him for becoming the man that we see today. Man, I'm pissed off. He ain't my running mate no more. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. I mean, listen, they're finding a reason. They're finding a reason to say that LeBron is inserting himself in something that everyone else is inserting themselves in the same thing. Everyone is talking about Kyrie. They're talking about how he's matured, his growth to this point. Obviously going to play in Boston. Everybody talking about the same shit. Obviously, when LeBron says something, because he used to play with him, and they cut out all the good stuff he said, just to say, oh, now he's inserting himself. Well, it's goddamn LeBron. Anything he says pertaining to basketball is going to be talked about. Hell, the Lakers then took over the goddamn headlines, and they're not even playing the damn championship.
LeBron.
Like, listen, this is simple. When it comes to Perk, when it comes to Paul Pierce, whatever they say about LeBron, you just don't pay attention to it because they are Boston Celtics fans, and the number one enemy of them was LeBron James. He is a trigger to them. They hate him with all the hate that they can possibly hate, right? So they're going to turn it anyway. That's just them. So you just go with it.
So you heard what they had to say. What are my thoughts? First of all, what Kendrick Perkins said is true. LeBron will even drop a tweet. LeBron even dropped a tweet when Tom Brady won his 7th champion. He always finds the right moment, right? The right moment. When it's always coincidental with him. When something big happens and everybody's flocking to that person, he'll jump in. And then all of a sudden people start saying, did you see what LeBron had to say? Did you see what LeBron had to say? ESPN, I see you mofos and what you do. Whenever something big happens in another NBA player's life, what ESPN always does, and they're very slick, House of Highlights does this too, Clutch Sports, you guys are really powerful. What they do is they'll now bring some graphic that is related to LeBron doing that similar thing and then bring LeBron James into it to keep him relevant, to always remind you, LeBron is there, LeBron is there, LeBron is there. People see through you guys like a glass menagerie, man. It's so obvious what these guys do. Now, let's get to what Shannon Sharp said. Shannon Sharp, I think I said this on the show yesterday. I wonder what goes on in the mind of a LeBron fan? Because Shannon Sharpe saw that and he's like, I don't understand. Like, what is he talking about? What does he mean? He's like, I thought it was perfectly fine. It seemed perfectly normal to me. Like, what's the issue here? Yes, he said that. He was giving his props. I don't see what the problem is. Now, here's what's interesting. I genuinely believe that Shannon Sharpe didn't see a problem with it. I genuinely believe that a LeBron fan did not see an issue with it, did not take an issue with it. I genuinely believe that. They generally believe this. Let's get to Gilbert Arenas. That was the most interesting part of this entire soundbite. Why was that interesting? Gilbert Arenas said something that I absolutely did not understand. Gilbert Arenas said that the reason Kendrick Perkins said what he said is the very reason that Paul Pierce says what he says on TV, which is these guys were former Boston Celtics. And I'm going to call cap on all of that. Kendrick Perkins has been on ESPN twerking it up, shaking it up, slapping these people in the hallway with honey and all kind of crazy stuff for LeBron James. He been the one running around there like a madman talking about LeBron James is the GOAT. Kendrick Perkins has been on that train. Kendrick Perkins got into an argument, a lover's quarrel with Shannon Sharpe talking about who been supporting LeBron James more. That was Kendrick Perkins. So I'm gonna call a big fat ass cap on that one. We're gonna throw a yellow flag on that play, you capping. Take your hat off your head, you capping right now. Kendrick Perkins is a huge LeBron James fan. So it ain't got nothing to do with being no Celtics fan. Ain't got nothing to do with that. Yeah, they competed against each other, but that don't mean nothing. Gilbert Arenas competed against LeBron James in the finals, and Gilbert Arenas said in between games they was playing pool at LeBron James' apartment in Cleveland. Cut that. So what that mean? Like, it don't mean nothing. Kendrick Perkins is a LeBron James guy. He has been getting annoyed with LeBron over the last few weeks. That is a fact. That is a fact. But to say that the reason he's saying that is because he's a Celtic, I don't buy it. I don't buy it whatsoever. And Gilbert tried to dismiss them like, nah, he's a Celtic. Nah. Don't try to run away from the point that he made. Now, Paul Pierce is something else. You got me there. But with what he was saying, nah. Don't dismiss it. There is some validity to that, to what Kendrick Perkins was saying. I just think it's hilarious. Because there must be this code within the LeBron James fan club, which is everybody all the time needs to say nice stuff about LeBron. You remember when Shannon Sharpe went out there on ESPN First Take when Stephen A. Smith went his alma mater and called out LeBron James for saying that the Miami Heat didn't do nothing for his career. He would have still been LeBron James or whatever. And then the same Gilbert Arenas said, well, why is Shannon Sharpe saying that about LeBron James? So, Gil, we're going to call cap on that. Foul on the play, flag on the play. Take off that hat, you capping. Shannon Sharpe, he was defending his man. And really, recently, Charles Barkley had a sit down on Outkick. And he was talking about a bunch of different things, but there was one particular topic that he also weighed in on, which was basically this drama that's been surrounding the WNBA. As you guys know, there was that major spat that took place on ESPN between Stephen A. Smith and Monica McNutt. Of course, Shannon Sharpe and Molly Curran were there, and in the aftermath of that, a bunch of people weighed in to give their thoughts on what took place on television. Now, during our coverage of that brouhaha that took place on ESPN, I said that there's a lot of drama surrounding the WNBA. And actually, one of our viewers messaged me. She's a lady, and she's like, "What do you mean?" No, I there was a post that I put on my Instagram story. If you guys are not following me on Instagram, my handle is CTABANZ, and I said that when will the drama stop? That's what I wrote under the picture on my story. And she goes, "What drama are you talking about?" And then I responded to her. I said, "Look, I guess all press is good press, but a lot of the press that we have around that's circulating around the WNBA has very little to do with the game itself and a lot to do with the storylines surrounding the game. And basically, a lot of this has to do, this particular issue here, some of it at least, has to do with the foul, the hard play that took place on Caitlin Clark. And people are talking about that. You've had various voices weighing, like Matt Barnes say, well, why aren't they protecting her and all of these different things? So it's centered on drama, not so much about entertainment, but more so about drama, at least from my view and the view of others. So what happened? While Charles Barkley was on Outkick, they asked him to weigh in on this particular story, and Charles Barkley basically went at the WNBA, because essentially his point was they are doing a terrible job at protecting the golden goose, in this case in Caitlin Clark. So really that's what he decided to focus on. So what we want to do is we want to play exactly what Charles Barkley had to say here, and then we're going to come back and react to this comment. Take a listen to what Charles Barkley had to say there.
Would you ever think you'd be on Inside the NBA talking about the WNBA protecting somebody from violence, like and being women being petty and all that? You ever think, you know what I mean?
Hey, Dan, no, I thought like, man, these girls getting ready to hit the lottery. I mean, this is a great time to be a woman in the WNBA. You know, with these young girls coming in, especially Caitlin. I mean, what she's done for the game the last couple of years. I mean, she is a shining star. I mean, and the thing I like about her, man, she doesn't say a word.
Right.
I mean, yeah, she's never said a word about anybody. She just shows up and does her job. And you knew it was going to be a growth period for her, because you have to, all rookies, it's a shock to your system. Kobe Bryant struggled. Charles Barkley struggled. Everybody struggled. You know, I tell people it was going to be a struggle, because she's going to adjust. She's going to get stronger. She's going to adjust to the speed of the game and the physicality. But I didn't think she was going to have to worry about all this petty nonsense that's going on. And I've heard a lot of people get varied opinion. And I was like, well, listen, this is not the old days where any publicity is good publicity. It's really bad publicity for the WNBA, because you know why? We're not talking about basketball. Anytime you have a sport, especially a niche sport, and you're talking about negativity instead of how great Aja Wilson is, how great New York, the Liberty are, Connecticut Sun playing well. You got the great Diana Taurasi out there. Got Angel Reese doing something in Chicago. So when you're talking about all this pettiness and negativity, you're not talking about the game. And so I felt bad. I was mad, because I'm like, guys, we're not even talking about basketball. And like I say, yeah, she's going to undergo some rookie hazing, but clearly there's some overboard going on. If you go back and look at that play, you can tell the way the Chicago Sky's bench jumped for joy when she knocked that girl down. They were like, way to go, knocking her down. You can just tell. It's like, whoa, that's a little much. You know, yeah, and I had no problem. We've always gave rookies a little bit of the business, but you can just tell that they've been going overboard. If you, like I say, if you look at the Chicago's bench when they knock her down, they all jump up and say yes. So you can tell they're doing a little too much. And it's really unfortunate, because she's bringing so much notoriety to the game. I mean, I watched more college basketball in the last 2 years, women-wise, than I have my entire life. I mean, it's been must-see TV. I mean, the ratings for the last two Final Fours, they're the highest-rated games in ESPN history for basketball games. Not just men and women, just women, for men and women. And the thing that also, I'm like, they act like she didn't earn it. I'm like, the woman just set the record for the most points ever scored by a man or a woman. You know, they're like, well, she's only getting this shine because she's white. I'm like, well, is race a factor? Yes, race is a factor, but her resume speaks for itself. She just set the record for the most points ever scored by a man or a woman.
So you heard what Charles Barkley had to say. Do you know what? This particular story has so many layers that I don't even know what to think anymore. Why am I saying this? I came across a clip from Art of Dialogue that was recommended to me with today, as a matter of fact, with Dr. Omar Johnson, who was there, and he was reacting to this. He was talking about the WNBA, Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, and he was going at some various figures. I think Charles Barkley, Shannon Sharp, and who else did he go at? I think LeBron James and someone else. Pretty long segment. And the angle he took was an angle that I hadn't even considered. And the angle he took was basically, why are people trying to demonize all the other athletes that were in the WNBA that kind of laid the groundwork for Caitlin Clark to come in and then take the league to where it is, right? So he was speaking from that standpoint. The standpoint I believe Charles Barkley is speaking from is, he's saying, and I think he was making sort of the similar point that Stephen A. Smith made without there being jealous comments. But essentially what he was saying was, Caitlin Clark is bringing in a lot of attention into the league. She's not the only one, I might add. Angel Reese is doing as well. They're having record numbers, attendance, and all of that. But basically what he's saying is that these figures are bringing a lot of attention to the WNBA. And the current players stand to make a lot of money because of all the new eyeballs, who's going to bring in new sponsors, new revenue. You get how it works. So he's saying, why not ensure that that's being protected? Now, it is important to state that today, June 8th, that Caitlin Clark recently published or released a statement where she said that she doesn't believe there's anything foul or evil taking place. She just believes that everybody's being competitive. That she doesn't think there's any hidden agendas or anything like that. So that's what she says. She just says that she's up for it. Players are just, the other athletes are just playing competitive basketball, right? So she believes that to be the case, that she's not being targeted or anything like that. I think Charles Barkley's overarching point is that, the WNBA needs to do whatever it takes to protect their golden goose. Now, is there precedence for this? I believe there is, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to go back to the NBA because I've heard former athletes like John Sally basically say that the NBA in certain instances made sure that you protected Michael Jordan because he was the cash cow for the NBA, the biggest cash cow they've ever seen, if we're talking about interest and eyeballs and all of that. So the league would ensure that he's protected. I've also heard Gilbert Arenas allude to things like, you're not going to see somebody go hit LeBron James or something like that. Like, that's never going to happen and stuff like that because the NBA would never. You get what I'm saying? Because these are the faces of the league, right? So Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, these athletes, these women seem to be the face of the WNBA, and so therefore they need to be protected. That's at least how I'm interpreting what Charles Barkley is saying. I could be 100% wrong, and he's saying I believe that the WNBA needs to do a better job of that. That's just my view. I could be 100% wrong. Let me get into this topic here. This is one of the most perplexing shows we're going to do that I've done in a very long time, that we produce in a very long time. Let me just get into the nitty-gritty of this. As you guys are fully aware, we just produced a show just yesterday talking about the fact that Warner Brothers, TNT, and these guys are fighting to be a part of this new NBA deal that they've gotten, that the NBA is securing with all of these major networks. You have Amazon, you have, I think, NBC. I think it's NBC. You have ESPN. We've done shows about this, right? And the NBA just landed a $76 billion deal over the next 10 years, right? So one would surmise that this product is extremely popular for them to be able to 3x their revenue, because the prior deal they were on was $25 million. Fantastic. So I'm going through the internet, right? And I see a picture that is sent to me from Yahoo Sports, who I follow on Yahoo Sports. And I see the image and I immediately share the image on my Instagram story. Again, for those of you not following me on Instagram, my handle is CTABANZ. Y'all can follow me there. And I'm like, this, and I put the wow emoji. I'm like, the shocked emoji. I'm like, this cannot even be real. But apparently, the NBA just had its worst viewed game in the NBA Finals since 2007. And I was like, how is this even possible? Let me get into this. So let me get into the article here. It's from Yahoo Sports. It says, NBA Finals ratings. Mavericks Celtics posts worst Game 1 numbers since 2021. The Dallas Mavericks weren't the only group that underperformed in Game 1 in the 2024 NBA Finals. The series opener averaged a 5.7 rating and 10.99 million viewers on ABC per Sports Media Watch, making it the least watched NBA Finals Game 1 since the league hit its ratings nadir with the 2020 and 2021 finals. Beyond those two, 10.99 is the league's lowest number since 2007. The 2020 NBA Finals between the Miami Heat and Los Angeles Lakers averaged only 7.69 million viewers, while the 2021 series between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns averaged 8.7 million. Those numbers are a 5% decline from last year's Denver Nuggets Heat Game 1 and 8% decline in ratings when compared to the Boston Celtics last trip to the NBA Finals in 2020 against the Golden State Warriors. In a vacuum, it would be surprising for finals with the Celtics and the Mavs to underperform given the size of the Celtics fan base and the star power of Luka Doncic, but the lopsided nature of Game 1 obviously impacted the numbers. Boston was up 37-20 by the end of the first quarter and led by as much as 29 in 107-89 win. Okay, so basically the article goes on to say a few other things about ratings and all of that. Let me get into this. I've been following this story and I've been listening to various sources, right? I listen to conservative personalities. I listen to liberal personalities talking sports, talking politics, talking business. And whenever they discuss the NBA, usually what you hear is that the NBA is suffering, the NBA is suffering, the NBA is suffering. And you're like, okay. Then you hear the numbers with the ratings. You're like, okay. Then you look at the last All-Star game and how horrendous that was with viewership and all of that. You're like, okay, this makes sense. And then you turn around and you hear ESPN is, you hear ESPN is going to offer $2.8 billion to the NBA over the next 10 years. You hear, what is it? I think NBC is offering $2.6 billion. Then you have Amazon, who's offering over $1 billion, and you have TNT, Warner Brothers fighting to get within the mix. And you're like, they just 3x'd the deal that they won before, which was a $25 billion deal. Now they're at $76 billion. But then you hear these numbers, and you're like, well, how do we reconcile all of this? Personally, I don't understand what's going on. I personally do not. If you look at viewership in the NBA, especially the NBA Finals and all of that, over the last 25, 30 years, the numbers have just been declining. It was at its zenith when Michael Jordan was there. The most viewed NBA game ever was in 1998, Game 6 with the Chicago Bulls. That was the single most viewed basketball game in the history of the sport. And the greatest player of all time, by a wide margin, Michael Jordan was there playing. And ever since then, they've not been able to capture those numbers. Even the Golden State Warriors and all of them, LeBron, Stephen Curry, yeah, they were good. They still weren't on the level of Jordan and the Bulls and all of that. But now, when you hear these type of numbers of 10 million, and of course they had lower numbers, but what confuses me is the fact that they just landed this big deal, and then you see this sharp decline in viewership, and I'm like, how does all of this work? I am so confused. I wish someone somewhere would explain this to me. Really, because I don't understand. I really don't understand how all of this is working.